Welcome. Let's take a guided tour of the Bad Cat Void Frontier asset pipeline. We're going to break down exactly how you take your source files, like models and textures, and get them into the game ready to go. So here's our game plan. We'll start with a high-level overview, the big picture. Then we'll meet the tools you'll be working with every day. After that, we'll walk through the entire workflow for adding a new asset, learn how to check our work, and wrap up with some troubleshooting tips to get you out of any jams. Okay, let's start by zooming out a bit. Before we start typing commands, it's super helpful to understand the journey every single asset takes. Think of it like a 3-stage evolution that gets a file from your hard drive into the game engine. So everything begins as a source asset. This is your .png, your .obj file, the original thing you check into the repository. Then, when you build, it gets processed into what we call the loose workspace. This is a temporary area where files are in a game-ready format, but still separate. This is absolutely key for iterating quickly. And finally, for the actual game release, all those loose files get bundled up into a big optimized runtime archive, a VPak. That's what the game loads for the best performance. So what's holding this whole process together? It's this one file, the asset database, or .adb. You can think of it as the brain of the operation. It's a database just for the tools that keeps a ledger of every single source file, what it turns into, and what other files it depends on. This is what makes our builds so fast, because the tools can just look in the .adb and see what's changed instead of rebuilding everything. And this is critical. This file is not used by the game. It never ships. It's purely for our tools. All right, let's meet the command line tools that make all this magic happen. There are 3 core utilities you're going to get to know really well. Each one is simple, powerful, and has a very specific job to do. The division of labor here is super clean. First, you have Asset Importer. Its job is to take your source files and convert them into our engine's special formats. Then there's VPak Builder, which, you guessed it, takes those converted files and packs them into the final VPak archives. And finally, you have Asset Viewer, which is kind of like your Swiss Army knife. It lets you peek inside both the asset database and the VPaks to inspect, debug, and just see what's going on. Okay, enough theory. Let's get our hands dirty and see how this all works in the real world. We're going to walk through the exact steps for adding a brand new model, its texture, and a sound effect into the project. First things first, you can't use the tools if they don't exist yet. So step 1 is always to build them. We just run our main build script, tell it which preset we want, like Linux debug, and specify the tools target. This is way faster than building the whole game. With our tools built, it's time to run the asset importer. Now pay attention to the path here. We're running the tool from inside our build directory. We just pointed at our source assets folder, tell it the output is the current directory, and which .adb file to update. The importer then scans everything, finds any newer changed files, and does its thing. Now, here is where the magic really happens. Look at this transformation. The importer doesn't just copy files. It takes our cat.obj and turns it into an engine-optimized cat.vmesh. Our .png becomes a .vtex. These formats are designed to be loaded super fast by the GPU and use less memory. For now, you can see audio files like our .wave are just copied over as is, but the models and textures get that special conversion treatment. Okay, this right here, this is probably the most important tip for an efficient workflow. That build directory isn't just a destination, it's an active, editable workspace. You can tweak files directly in there, rerun the importer, and see your changes in-game almost instantly. It's perfect for rapid iteration. Just remember the golden rule. Once you're happy with the changes, copy them back to the main assets folder before you commit. The last step is to package it all up with the VPak Builder. Now notice, we're actually using 2 different methods here. For audio, it's a simple pack based on a directory. But for our models and textures, we're doing something way smarter. We're telling the builder to use the asset database. It reads the ADB, figures out all the right files that need to go into the models VPak, and bundles them up perfectly. Awesome. Our assets are all packed up, but they're inside these VPak files, which are kind of like black boxes. How can we be sure everything is correct without having to boot up the whole game? Well, that's where our friend Asset Viewer comes in. This is the #1 question you're going to ask. You have a source file, say crate.obj, but what did it become? What's its final exact path inside the VPak after being processed? It's a really simple 2-step dance. First, you ask the asset database. You use Asset Viewer to search the .adb for your source file name. It'll spit back the exact output path. Then you just take that output path and feed it right back into Asset Viewer, telling it to extract that specific file from the VPak. Simple, precise, and you always get exactly what you're looking for. But hey, maybe you don't need to extract the whole file. Sometimes you just want to check some details. For that, you can use the -show command. It's super handy for quickly checking things like texture dimensions, mesh vertex count, or other metadata without ever having to pull the file out of the archive. Now this is a real time saver. The viewer can try to extract an asset and all of its dependencies. This is fantastic. You can just say, hey, give me this model, and it'll try to find and pull out all of its textures at the same time. No more hunting them down one by one. So is it magic? Well, not quite. It's a best effort kind of deal. For models, it literally scans the compiled mesh file looking for text that looks like a path to a texture. Because of that, it works best for straightforward model-to-texture relationships. It's an awesome feature, but it's good to know its limitations. All right, to finish things off, let's run through a quick checklist of the most common issues and some best practices. Keep these in mind, and you'll save yourself a whole lot of headaches down the line. Seriously, these 5 things solve like 90% of all problems. First, path issues. Always run the tools from inside the build/preset/bin directory. Second, if your asset isn't updating, remember the importer is smart and skips unchanged files. Just use the -force flag to make it re-import everything. And lastly, if you've just pulled new assets from the repo and they aren't showing up, you might need to run the build script with -copy VPak files to sync them into your workspace. And that's our tour of the Bad Cat asset pipeline. From source file to packed, game-ready VPak, you now know the entire journey. For all the nitty-gritty details, the asset_pipeline_userguide.md in the docs folder is always your single source of truth. All right, now you've got the knowledge. Go build something cool.